Okay, so for our lesson today, we are going to be using several different supplies. We're going to use Q-tips. I'm going to use a dull pencil tip, and I have gotten myself some tempera paint. Notice that my paint I don't have a whole lot of paint. You're working with a really small square, so I don't want you to have to get a lot of paint. So I've made it so you have just this small little baking paper wrapper, and I've given you a little bit of white, a tiny bit of black, and lots of red. So my square is going to be one of the red squares. So the first thing that I want to do before I begin painting is I'm making note of all of these little lines. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see it better. Okay, so there's a couple of things that you can do. Number one, when you start adding your paint, the paint is going to cover up the pencil. So I determined that instead of outlining everything in Sharpie marker, I wanted you to be able to figure out how you want to do those lines. The first thing I want to do for me is I'm going to make a dark red. My first technique is going to be using my pencil, the tip of it, and I'm going to be dipping it into my palette. And the first step I'm going to do is going over all of those tiny little lines using dots. When you paint with dots, that's called pointillism. Pointillism is meant to be a really beautiful technique that you can use to cover an entire surface and blend your paints together in a really interesting fashion. I'm going to zoom back out, and the first thing I'm going to do is just use my Q-tip to mix a little bit of that black and a little bit of red. Black can really change the color quickly, so you want to be real careful. You can go through probably 2 or 3 Q-tips in one painting session. Obviously, it's double-sided, so keep that in mind. So I'm going for a dark red just to get me started. I'm going to wipe off some of my extra paint. And the next thing I'm going to do is dip my pencil into my paint. And now I'm going to go over those little lines. I'm going to zoom back in for you so you can watch what I'm doing. And I'm going to be just touching the paper with my pencil. I have to keep going back and putting paint on my pencil, which I am now using as a paintbrush. So even though this is, not a fast technique, it is definitely a technique that is going to really help you to make an interesting painting without ever touching a paintbrush. So what I'm doing is I'm emphasizing all of those dark lines. And this is just one of many ways that you can interpret this little work of art. Because you can't see what this tiny square is a part of, it makes it look very abstract. So this abstract technique that I'm showing you is one that is probably going to become one of your favorite techniques in the semester of Art Fundamentals. The nice thing about being able to use a technique like this at the beginning of the semester is it's going to automatically inspire you, because you're going to stop thinking about the fact that you're painting something realistic. All you're doing right now is focusing on lines, and you're creating them with dots. Now, this might take a little time, But your efforts, if you take your time and do this the way that I'm showing you, in the end, it's going to be beautiful. So right now, you're going to pay close attention when you get your square. And again, this is only one of many different techniques you can use. I want you to make sure that you are seeing all of those little lines. This one right here was really light. You might not have even seen it from being projected, but it's there. If you see a really light line, I still want you to emphasize it. Every little line and detail that you pay attention to is going to really make this stand out. Now, in order for you to be able to have enough time to see all of the techniques, I am only going to do a small portion of my square so that you're not spending 20 minutes watching me finish the entire thing. Now, I have already spent 6 minutes doing this technique. And already it is proven to be really beautiful. When you photograph your artwork after you have taken the time to do what I have taught you to do, you're going to enlarge this in your portfolio, in your digital portfolio, and you're going to be amazed at how beautiful your artwork looks. So you'll notice that with my pencil, I have to keep going back to my paint and dipping it in. I have not dipped my paint any deeper than just the tip, so you don't need to load your pencil with paint. That's not really an effective way of doing this technique. Less is more in this case. And I'm just going to finish working on this little section, and then I'm going to start using my Q-tip. Another thing that I have used, another tool that I have used to help me with pointillism technique is different sized nails. The nail heads have proven to be a really nice little way of creating larger dots or circles. So that's something to consider, and if you're interested, I can certainly get those out. All right, so even though I'm going to finish the rest of my square, I think right now I'm good with what I have so far. Some of you might end up getting a square that has Sharpie marker written on it. If you see Sharpie marker, that means that's an area that has to be almost black. The reason is that's an area that's really, really dark on our eagle inspiration image. So I want you to pay attention to that. You're not just going to leave that black, although you could. I want you to go over that with a really dark paint, an almost black paint or pencil or pen or whatever medium you choose to go with. Okay, so now I am ready to move on to the next part. I'm just going to set my pencil aside, and all you have to do so that you can use your pencil later on in the day is just take the tip of your pencil and wipe it off with a paper towel or something, and it's totally good to go. All right. So now I'm going to work on the areas around my around those little dark hairs. And I'm going to start using my Q-tip. Now my Q-tip has a pretty large circle that it'll create. I'll show you on my scrap paper around here so you can see how large of a dot it makes. What a big difference. you might decide, oh, I don't really like that. I would prefer to have something smaller. And in that case, that is something I really like to see. It means you're paying attention to the details. You're focusing on the things that I want you to focus on. But when I give you these tools, this is something that you could work with and try to figure out. So I'm just kind of dabbing it on using the side here. And I don't want my darker lines to disappear. I want to be really careful about that because once they disappear, you're not going to get them back. And if you make a mistake, you can't throw that piece away. I do not have backup pieces. So those are a couple things to keep in mind. If you accidentally cover up some like I just did, I'm just going to go back with my pencil, dip it in my paints, and go back over it. Okay? You could also use just your regular black. You can mix many different variations of red and use that in your piece. What I am trying to do is cover up all of the white from the original surface. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to make some different shades, tints and shades of red. When you're working with just one color and black and white, you're making different tints and shades of one color. That is called monochromatic. So each of you are doing a monochromatic painting if you choose this technique. So you'll be able to try to use the different tools that you have in your art box. You could ask me for different things. The main objective right now, because of what's going on in our world, was for me to avoid having you guys share different supplies. So I'm trying to give you techniques of things that you can do without sharing supplies with a lot of people. Now I'm going to get one more thing out. I have a little it's just kind of just a little tool I have, and I'm going to try something different to make some smaller dots. The objective is that you be able to be creative with what you have. So if you don't have anything in your backpack or your art box that can make dots easily, or if you get frustrated with the Q-tip like I just did, then what I would do is just, you can always ask, and you can just kind of look around and see what else do I have that could potentially make little dots. So I'm going back and I'm just going back to bring back my really the red parts. And now I'm going to go ahead and mix up some white in my red. And do some light red or pinkish dots. And remember, I can always go back and bring out those details and those lines that I am emphasizing. My favorite tool so far with this has been my pencil. My pencil creates more, it gives me more control over those little areas. And it just seems to be the precision that I am able to achieve with my pencil. It just makes a really big difference. So any of those lines that were starting to disappear, I make sure I go back over them. And then if I want to use my pencil again to make more dots, I just wipe it off. And I'm going to change colors or different, move on to a darker tone. So I'm still using my pencil, and now I'm just using it in my little cup to mix up another, actually I'll go with a lighter tone this time. However you want to utilize that space, however you want to apply that color, as long as you have your lines emphasized, I feel like you'll be successful. And I'm just going back and forth with different colors and finding what I think works for me. Okay.